It should pop up any second now. Perfect. Thanks, Legolas. All right, so take a few more seconds to fill out your answers and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm super interested to see how many of y'all are like classics, like 70s versus the original trilogies that came out versus the new era of Lord of the Rings. So 3, 2, and final answers, 1. All right, so let's see what we have here. Share results. All right, Fellowship of the Ring, tried and true, amazing. Not too much love for the Battle of Five Armies. Their ideas on like gravity were absolutely insane, but I watched it, so I can't say much. All right, stop share results. Let's get to it. All right, so for those of you who might not be aware, Lord of the Rings is based on J.R.R. Tolkien's literary works of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, released in the 1930s and the 1950s. And Peter Jackson picked up the film in the 1990s and went on to create this billion-dollar franchise. I believe it ended up being $5.6 billion that they generated globally. And it went on to win a ton of Academy Awards, 11 total, and even boosted the tourism economy because after the movies were made, tourism in New Zealand went up by 40%. So it had a huge impact here. And some of the first visitors, before we get into the different locations that you can view, were the Maori. They were descendants of the Polynesian Islands who came here about 1,000 years ago. And they lived here pretty much undisturbed until about the 1600s when they had their first European settlers come in and try and settle, but they didn't get too far. They battled it out and they left not to return for 200 years. They even named the cove that they arrived on like Murder Cove or Murder Bay. So no one really bothered to travel back until 200 years later when James Cook kind of made his way around the Pacific Ocean, traveling to each island. So there's a lot of culture and history here that you can immerse yourself in if you ever get the chance to visit New Zealand. And New Zealand, to note, is made up of 2 main islands, North Island and South Island. And the way that we're gonna kind of go through these different areas is just start off from the top and work our way down. I think that would be easiest on everyone's eyes and on Google Earth. So we're gonna hop on into it and start off at the Shire. So the Shire is a place that you can actually visit called Hobbiton. It's become one of New Zealand's biggest attractions. And let's make sure that you can all see that. And it has over 44 hobbit holes that you can go visit. If I at least move this while this gets fixed, you can go there and see all the different holes. They took a lot of attention in making sure that the details were just right. There's a tree that you can see in this next photo that is actually artificial, if you see that. It's an artificial tree and all the leaves that you see on that tree are made of silk, and each one had to be individually placed on that tree. Peter Jackson was very particular about who the artists were, making sure that they took their time placing every tree, as the leaves had to get repainted because of the sun kind of dulling out the color. But here we have Hobbiton. It's a really beautiful area. Lots of trees, and they came to this because they were scouting out locations for what J.R.R. Tolkien described as like really enchanted rolling hills, unbothered by Middle Earth's problems. And so they came across this private farm and asked the farmer if they would be able to set up shop here for a few months. And they never heard about the books or anything. They agreed to it, not knowing how transformative that agreement would be for them. So you can absolutely travel here. You can head on over to the Green Dragon Inn, take a look around. Like I said before, there's about 44 hobbit holes that you can visit, and each one has a particular color associated on the door. And that represents if it's a storage room, a place that you can visit, or just like a vacant wall that there's nothing really inside. So that's pretty neat. And you can also check out their gift shop and pick up some memorabilia on the way here. So fantastic place, would definitely add that to your list of things to do. Our next stop, well, it's not actually in the films at all. It was way too cool not to mention. So we're here at the Waitomo glowworm caves. And this is a species of glowworm that is indigenous to New Zealand. It's stunning. They have tour groups that will take you through. You can see the wonderful caves here, boat through. You can even take these little mini inner tubes and raft on through the underground river. Yeah, so there's some rapids there that you can go down. Really neat experience, and it absolutely got added to my must-see list if I ever visit New Zealand. So wanted to share that with y'all too. But our second location that's related to the Lord of the Rings movies is going to be Mount Doom, which was filmed on top of Mount Naruhoi in the Tongariro National Park. So from this distance, it doesn't look too bad. However, based on the reviews I read, if you were to climb up to Mount Doom here, the first part is relatively easy. There's not much elevation gain, but once you hit that base of this active volcano, it does get a little intense as there are some loose gravel, rocks, and you become really aware of your footing. So you want to make sure you have the proper footwear and are prepared to endure this full day hike. It's one of 3 main volcanoes. It's right in the middle, and it last erupted back in 1977. And you're more than welcome to hike to it today. You just want to make sure that you're keeping up with the local guidelines, because sometimes those fumes can get pretty strong and making it pretty difficult to withstand if you're too close. So, and again, once you get to the top, you have some really cool geothermal pools to look at and some great 360 views. From here, we're going to head on over to the Hobbit Hideaway located in the Wellington area. If you don't quite remember where this scene is from, it is where the hobbits are on the road rummaging for mushrooms, and Frodo senses something's amiss, tells them to get off the road, and boom, seconds later, there's Ringwraiths looking for them, and they're able to escape by throwing a bag of potatoes the other direction. So you can check this out. It's located on Mount Victoria in the area. It's a really cool recreational spot with a lot of hiking options right in the center of the town belt. And it gives you some really cool panoramic views of the area. There's mountain biking trails, about 3 miles worth of hiking trails here that you can interconnect and make as long as you want. And to note, here's the map. Here's that panoramic view that you would get. And again, that trail system that you can intertwine, making it as long as you want. And if you fly into this area at this airport, they even installed a Smeagol homage. So they have a structure here that you can go and see. So New Zealand is definitely aware that they are associated with Lord of the Rings, and they have really cool tributes to that throughout the country. So from here, we're going to head on over to our last stop in North Island, which is the Path of the Dead, also located in Tongariro Pinnacles. It was formed over 7 to 9 million years of just constant erosion. And it's a really cool scene to see. There is an extended cut as we see Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas traveling through to make sure that the army of the dead keep their oaths and help them defeat the army of Saruman. And so let's see if this will play for a second. So this is the extended version. It's about 2 minutes long, totally worth watching if you get the chance, but it's very reminiscent of Bryce Canyon in Utah, just a bit more gray and pretty eerie, but it's a fantastic stop to go and check out. It's about an 1.5 hour hike from the parking lot to get here, and not too much elevation gain either. So really neat, 1000% would recommend checking that out if you get the chance. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to head on over to the South Island and go to Dimrildale, which is the name in the movie. But in real life, this is Mount Owen. Mount Owen is about 6,151 feet, and really stunning landscape to see here. And if you're trying to pinpoint it in the movie, this is the scene where Gandalf sacrifices himself fighting the cave demon, goes down, tells them to fly off, and they run outside of the caves. They try to recollect themselves. They're in mourning. They just lost Gandalf. What are they going to do? Spoiler alert, he comes back in the second movie as Gandalf the White. So was it really a sacrifice? I don't know. Not hating, just saying. But Mount Owen itself is really gorgeous. It's located in Kahurangi National Park, which is the second largest national park in New Zealand. Really beautiful, again, stunning landscape. They have a ton of trail systems that can provide you really short experiences, like 10-mile hikes all the way to 56 miles. So a lot to see and do here. From here, we're going to head on over to Rohan, which is located in the Ashburton area just north of Queenstown. And it's about a 3-mile hike to get here. And if you're trying to figure out where exactly they built this, it's right here on these hills called Mount Sunday. So if we zoom in just a bit, you can see how this mountain lines up with this one in the background. And here we have that. So they actually took about 3 months to build Rohan on these hills. And after building it, they filmed here and then took everything down, making sure not to leave a trace. And so again, you can hike here, 3-mile hike, pretty easy, really beautiful grasslands in the surrounding mountains that are available to you to climb if you're into that sort of recreation. And just as a movie fun fact, when we see Arwen come out and look off into the distance, we have that wavering flag with their crest on it, getting kind of like whipped around, and then it breaks off and like flies all dramatically down to the ground. And then we see Aragorn, Legolas, and all of them kind of come into the scene. So that was unplanned. The flag, it was just really windy that day and it broke off, and it just fit so well into the environment and the atmosphere that they were trying to go for that they ended up keeping it in the scene. So pretty neat movie fact. There's quite a few of those unplanned moments that they kept in the movie. So it's fun looking for those if you plan on rewatching them. Next, we're here at the Beacons of Gondor, where they get lit. If you recall, Pippin sneaks off to light the beacons and call for aid. So he succeeds and all the beacons end up getting lit. So this is where that is filmed, which is the Fox and Franz Joseph glaciers. They are the world's most accessible glaciers. So if you were wanting to get into mountain climbing, this would be the place to start off at. They are super easy. They have a ton of things to see and do. You can go ice climbing here, explore the ice caves. They have a lot of tour groups, and you can fly in via helicopter. It's pretty cool, and they might drop you off to some of the most challenging and among the favorite places for mountain climbers to climb, which is going to be Mount Cook. It's the highest mountain in New Zealand at just over 12,000 feet. And where we see here, it looks like the ice just goes on far, 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 right? But what's really cool, you'll see in the next slide, is we end up just 2 hours or less out of the way into a tropical rainforest. So it's really neat. But while you're here on the ice, you can check out the glacier lakes, again, doing some more climbing. It's a fan favorite amongst the mountain climbers. So imagine we take that helicopter ride back down into the tropical glaciers, where we see some of the exclusive animals that New Zealand has to offer. So we're going to look at 3 different animals, the first one being the tahr, like you see here. So this is a close relative of like a mountain goat, but just the New Zealand version. And then we have this massive bird called the kea. And they actually were a huge problem for farmers because they would land on the sheep, pluck out all of the wool, exposing their skin, and slowly start eating away at the sheep, which is a terrible way to go because the chunks are only so big, but enough to eventually kill the sheep. So they used to be a huge issue for farmers down in that area. They are a stunning bird, really colorful and beautiful. And the next bird we have is the kiwi, probably the most famous that we associate New Zealand with, is this cute little bird that can only be found on these islands. So if you're down here in the tropical rainforest, it's called the Fox Trail Tropical Glacier. There's a ton of trails to choose from, and you'd want to keep your eye out for any of these animals. From here, we're going to head on over to the location where Arwen washes out the ring race. Or the Nazgul, depending on what one you want to call them by. But she washes them out with her elvish powers and summons this like class 8 horse rapid to take him out. And if you want to experience something similar, but not quite as intense, they do offer rafting tours here as well. So here we are at Skipper's Canyon. The whole river is about 47 miles long. So tons of fast flowing, rapid opportunities for y'all to take part in. And the canyon itself is about 13 miles long. So you can raft down it, or you can take a boat jet, which is essentially a larger raft craft with a motor attached on the back, so you can get through that canyon a little faster. This area used to be known for mining, was huge during the gold mine era, but today is now just a really big tourist destination. So from here, we're gonna go on to the Gates of Moria, where the group fellowship still intact in that first movie, and they have to get past the mountain pass, but plans were stopped, so this is their last option, but they're met with a riddle to solve and a lake monster that Pippin ends up disturbing. That lake monster is called the Watcher and has a bunch of tentacles, and it grabs Frodo just after he speaks friend in Elvish, and the doors open, but then he's whisked away by this monster. They cut off the tentacle, they save him, and they run in, inevitably having to go through these caves. And we all know how that ended with Gandalf sacrificing himself, but I digress. The location that it was filmed at is Lake Alta. It's a glacier lake located in the Remarkables. Let me make sure. Yep, near Queenstown. And it's a really stunning area that you can hike to. It's about 2.2 miles to get here. Just over 600 feet in elevation gain, so relatively easy if you're in the area and want to check it out and recreate some of these scenes. That's always a possibility here in New Zealand. Next up, we have the Anduin River is the name in the series, and it's really stunning. They're canoeing here, trying to get to their next destination. And it's right off the river town of Manupuri. They offer a lot of different tours here, as you can see from these boats. And we can see the scene if we look off in the distance where they would have the canoes and filming the fellowship coming on through. This place is really stunning. So while you might not see the monuments that we see here in the films, like these massive statues, you'll see a lot of natural ones. The mountains that are nearby here have been shaped by glaciers over the course of thousands of years. So there's really a lot to see and do. You can canoe here, you can kayak here, stand-up paddleboard if that's what you're into. A lot of water recreational opportunities. In addition, there's a bunch of lakes, glacier lakes to hike to, so you can't go wrong visiting this area for sure. So that brings us to our last stop at the Fangorn Forest. While most of the Treebeard scenes were filmed in the studio in Wellington, New Zealand, some of those scenes were actually filmed here in Te Ana. It's near a farm town, like the forested farm town area. And this is where we see Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas looking for Merry and Pippin after they're taken by orcs and taken into the forest. So they're off looking to them, and this is the forest that those scenes were filmed in. And if you ever get to visit, I can totally see how you would think this is enchanted and might even think that you're hearing the trees talk, because if you're here by yourself, it might be a little eerie, but beautiful nonetheless. So again, Treebeard scenes, really cool. And on that note, I'm gonna leave y'all with a quote. So, it's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step on into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. Now, New Zealand is huge. There's so much to see and do. There should be a link in the chat box. You can actually do Lord of the Rings themed tours in New Zealand that will take you to all these different places if you're really into that. And so you can check that out. The link is in the chat box. There's a ton to see and do in New Zealand. They have kayaking, rafting, whitewater kayaking, so many opportunities. So it's really worth it to do your research and create your own ideal New Zealand itinerary. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to jump into the questions. If this is where you're taken off,